Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this Wednesday evening edition of the Infowars Nightly News. Today is October 19th, 2011. I'm Aaron Dyke, sitting in until Alex returns tomorrow on both the radio and nightly news broadcast. Coming up later in the program, we have Infowars contributor Patrick Henningsen. He'll discuss the move under the Obama administration to put troops in Uganda and other parts of Africa under the larger AFRICOM plan, as well as the stoking of war in Syria and Iran. But first in the news, Occupy Wall Street continues to draw attention, this time for calls for global governance. A group of prominent leftists, including Noam Chomsky and Naomi Klein, say we shouldn't rein in groups like the IMF and World Trade Organization or the G8, G20. Instead, we should institute democracy, so-called. And there are calls for global governance that are interchangeable with global democracy. And they've issued a text that's been supported by the United Nations group UNPA, which seeks the establishment of a United Nations Parliamentary Assembly. We have a clip now.
United for global democracy.
United for global democracy.
October 15th, 2011.
October 15th, 2011.
United in our diversity.
United in our diversity.
United for global change.
United for global change.
We demand global democracy.
We demand global democracy.
Global governance by the people, for the people.
Global governance by the people, for the people.
Inspired by our sisters and brothers in Tunisia.
Inspired by our sisters and brothers in Tunisia.
In Egypt. In Libya.
In
Syria. In Bahrain. Palestine, Israel.
Palestine, Israel.
Hermanos y hermanas en España.
Hermanos y hermanas en España.
Greece.
Greece.
We too call for a regime change.
We too call for a regime change.
Global regime change.
Global regime change.
Today we demand replacing the G8.
Today we demand replacing the G8
with the whole of humanity.
with the whole of humanity.
The G7 billion.
The G7 billion.
And so there you have it. While the Occupy crowd remains very diverse, including many in the fetters, you have these moves for global governance. They're comparing it to Mubarak in Egypt and other aspects of the Arab Spring, just as people like Al Gore called for an American version of the Arab Spring just prior to the beginning of Occupy Wall Street. Then at the same time, as Obama and other Democrats trying to co-opt this movement, we have reports that State Department agitator is now advising the Occupy movement. Ahmed Maher helped lead the Egypt's Arab Spring that resulted in a military dictatorship, calling that movement successful. Now he is helping to steer the Occupy Wall Street crowd. The report is in from Paul Joseph Watson today, but it's very alarming, and we have some of those quotes now. Years before the Egyptian revolution, the U.S. was quietly preparing for a global army of youth cannon fodder to fuel region-wide conflagrations throughout the world, both politically and literally. Maher's April 6 organization had been in New York City for the U.S. State Department's first alliance for the Youth Movement Summit in 2008. His group then traveled to Serbia to train under the Canvas organization, which was also U.S. funded, before returning to Egypt in 2010 with the U.S. International Crisis Group, which is Soros-led, and its operative Mohammed al-Baradi would spend the next year building up for the Arab Spring. As part of his role in leading the revolt against Mubarak, Maher fraternized with the likes of Zbigniew Brzezinski and George Soros through their involvement in the ICG. That's a quote from Tony Cartolucci, who's been following the issue closely and frequently writes for Infowars.com as well. And, of course, it's true. The State Department and other U.S. government entities were behind the Arab Spring, and now their assets are coming to the Wall Street occupation movement. So it's something to keep an eye on. We also have another quote. Egypt's Arab Spring has not led to democracy, but to another cruel dictatorship under which the military is killing minorities and imprisoning dissidents. Egyptians must take to the streets once again. That's Karim Amir from the Daily Beast. But he's right. It is a total military dictatorship. They're supposed to be temporary, only to facilitate elections. Now they don't want to step down. I have this article today from the London Guardian. Jailed Egyptian blogger on hunger strike says he's ready to die and says he'd rather commit suicide than be tried by a military junta for criticizing the army in a blog. So that's what happens in Egypt, and that's what they call democracy, I guess. Let's try instead to steer that anger against what's happening economically into recapturing sound money, into fighting back the Federal Reserve and other related issues. Now, we have a poll we discussed briefly last night. We're going to cover it more in depth tonight. It was on Washington's blog, and they have a great analysis. Who is to blame, Washington or Wall Street? And this captures the whole sentiment behind it. They found that many of the liberals blame Wall Street, while conservatives tended to blame Washington. Of course, there's anger on both sides of that aisle, the false left-right paradigm. Now, let's see those numbers from that Pulse opinion research reported in The Hill. Now, overall, they found of likely voters, about 56% tended to blame Washington, while only a third tended to blame Wall Street. 11% were not sure, and then there's a gender breakdown as well. But as the Washington blog rightly points out, it's a crony capitalism issue, and obviously both Wall Street and Washington are to blame. People on Wall Street were guilty of committing fraud with housing and the rest of it, but also the regulators, the government regulators, were also guilty of fraud. They're all part of this epidemic, and what people are sick of is bailing out these big banks while Main Street, while regular working people are continually punished by this economic downturn. But people like Hermanator, the Federal Reserve-inator, don't understand that. As you'll see in the debate clips we have coming up, the one candidate they always ignore is Ron Paul, even though he's the only one who's issued a balanced budget plan and the only one who's calling for reasonable policies. Let's go to those clips right now.
And they said, oh, the world's going to come to an end unless we bail out all the banks. So the banks were involved, and the Federal Reserve was involved. But who got stuck? The middle class got stuck. They got stuck. They lost their jobs, and they lost their houses. If you had to give money out, you should have given it to the people who were losing their mortgages, not to the banks.
But my point is this. What are the people who are protesting want from bankers on Wall Street? To come downstairs and write them a check? This is what we don't understand.
Yeah, and there's more up there, of course, but of course what they focused on in all the media was the staged fight between Romney and Perry as they bickered back and forth, and obviously they always give Ron Paul just very little time. And you saw Herman Cain's comment there. He previously blamed the Occupy Wall Street crowd for blaming Wall Street. What do you want, a government check? No, we just don't want these backdoor bailouts where the Federal Reserve facilitates everything. Just today in the news, the Federal Reserve helped these big banks move their derivative assets into FDIC protection. That's going to cause even more problems. But then what happened with the debate itself? Ron Paul was again ignored in the polls, despite the fact he won the local Vegas Fox 5 poll overwhelmingly, a state he does very well in, by the way. But then in the national polls, it was Cain, Romney, or Perry in the International Business Times. It was Newt Gingrich winning in the Politico poll. In the Fix poll in the Washington Post, Ron Paul was listed as a loser. Why? Because of his suit, the way it fit. And there's a deceptive caption which implies that he may be the first openly gay presidential candidate to file in New Hampshire. That's the kind of treatment you see for the only person really hitting the key issues anywhere in the mainstream debate within this false left-right paradigm. Of course, we know it's Ron Paul. Now, coming up, we have a special report that Mike Adams of Natural News and Rob Jacobson from right here at Infowars filed for the Infowars Nightly News. You heard Russell Means yesterday talking about the suppression of alternative cancer cures. Now they're going to profile the Brzezinski Clinic. Dr. Stanislaw Brzezinski helped develop a cancer treatment called anti-neoplastins, which has been shown to vanish brain tumors in many children. But instead of getting grant money to help expand his research, he's been persecuted by the U.S. government and various medical boards. They've tried to throw him in prison, but Brzezinski has won many battles and continues to fight. Here's that piece right now.
This is Mike Adams reporting for Infowars Nightly News from the Brzezinski Research Institute in Houston, Texas. And we are here to talk about the suppression of medical science. The history of cancer research is something very different from what you've been told, and certainly very different from what the mainstream media has reported. there are cancer cures that really work. And some of the most innovative and pioneering research in the history of our world is being done right here at the Brzezinski Clinic in Houston, Texas. And yet the Texas Medical Board attempts to suppress the research. The National Cancer Institute alters the research findings. The FDA tries to go after them time and time again, but failing because the truth will always win out. And the truth is that this is one of the most important institutions for cancer research in America today. Now, we sat down to talk with Dr. Stanislaw Brzezinski to get more information about why that's the case. Let's see what he has to say.
They will harass you mercilessly for trying to be innovative, for saving people's lives, for publishing your results so that the others may follow you. So that's what they do. And they should be exposed, because this is also some type of criminal activity. Because they are doing this, the other doctors cannot follow up what is the right way to treat the patients. When we began our treatment on genomic switches, well, we are really pioneers in the entire world. Now, many other researchers are going this way, and people begin to understand. You have articles, you have TV programs about it. Now it's just a matter of time when the breakthrough will occur and the new approach to cancer treatment will be firmly established. The research ultimately was proven to have practical application to treat patient, and then obviously I became competitor, quote unquote, to the other big guys in the field. So then the problem started.
It turns out his discovery threatened billions of dollars in profits currently generated by the cancer industry, an industry which actively seeks to suppress treatments that actually cure cancer.
They were looking how to take away my invention, and they thought that the best way to do it would be to prove that it doesn't work in the clinical trials which we sponsored. So that's why they use lower dosages. That's why they discontinued the treatment after about a month, knowing that obviously this is too short time to have any good results. So this is pretty much criminal activity, because people came trusting that they should receive adequate treatment, and they did not. So I think there should be a day when these people will be taken to court as simple criminals, because that's what they are, okay? Well, it's not up to me to do it, but that's what I think the justice should be done, and that's what they should face, because they did it for money. Basically, we are fighting for the other doctors. Probably they don't understand it yet, but we are fighting for the freedom for the other doctors. The doctor should have the right to choose the best treatment for his patient, and he should not be really told by the lawyers, by the people who have nothing to do with medicine, what to do. This is up to the doctor and patient. And as long as the doctor is using a reasonable approach, he should be able to do it. That's what was typical for medicine for centuries, and that's what America deserves. Not really the doctors to be robots who are told by the clerks from Washington or from Austin, Texas, what they should do. The doctors know how to take care of the patient. They should be given free hand, especially when dealing with advanced disease. That's what I'm fighting for. I'm fighting to give freedom to the doctors and freedom of choice to the patients who require treatment, who otherwise will die because there's no treatment available for them.
Dr. Brzezinski developed a cancer treatment called anti-neoplastins, and it caused brain tumors to vanish in many children.
There's nothing more important or rewarding to see some patients who arrive here literally told that they had days to weeks to months to live, and the decision to come here has saved their life, has given back to themselves, their families, their communities, their churches, their workplaces. I mean, they're becoming productive members of society. So to see that is a reward that I cannot put into words.
Some of the notable innovations that we have at the Brzezinski Clinic are expanding our tumor profiling. We look at the tumor as a whole. We look at the genes involved. We look at the tissue. We sequence the human tissue, and we see all the molecules that are involved there. It's not just the same type of lung cancer, adenocarcinoma per se. It's got a lot of different subtle varieties. So we look at different biomarkers in the blood, and we see exactly all the different variations that are going on. And right now we're even going further. We're going further by analyzing these circulating tumor cells of that cancer. So not only do we look at the tissue, we look at the circulating tumor cells to better formulate a treatment plan.